nui kako. My name is Inouye Tanigawa Lum, and I'm an assistant professor at the William S. Richardson School of Law and Kahuliao Center for Excellence in Native Hawaiian Law. Mahalo. It is my sincere privilege and honor to welcome you all tonight to our event on Earning Hope for the Future, featuring the Fall 2024 Dan and Maggie Inouye Distinguished Chair in Democratic Ideals, Julian Aguon. Mahalo nui for being here and sharing time and space with us. I also had the privilege of opening our space tonight here with an Oli Wow Hawaii, which I'm sure many of you know. But if you do not already know, this Oli orients us tonight. And when I think about the future and this idea of hope, I'm reminded about the knowledge that guides us, the knowledge that guides our people, one of love and enlightenment. And all of that together reminds me of Julian. So before I hand things over to two of my personal me'e or heroes, I have a couple folks to thank, and I'll make it quick. First, mahalo to our pu'ukani, our musicians who filled the space outside with songs of this place, of our ancestors and our lahui. Mahalo to Tai Sama Sama, Ka'imi Na'oau, Etu Wati, Dylan Nakahara, and Devin Nakahara. And while they are all alumni of this fine institution here at UH Manoa, they are also part of the award-winning Tuahine Troupe, under the tutelage of Dr. Keawe Lopez, a distinguished kumuhula and director of Kawaihuelani Center for Hawaiian Language. Mahalo to Kuma Keawe, as well as to Kawaihona Kealoha for their work to proliferate mele across our campus and in tonight's event especially. I'd also like to thank Sodexo for the ono food for in our reception earlier tonight. And finally, thank you to our lead event sponsors, the Department of American Studies and the William S. Richardson School of Law. And I promised you all I would be quick, so I'm humbled to turn the time over to two brilliant humans who give me so much hope, our beloved Dean Camille Nelson and tonight's speaker, Julian Aguon.
Thank you so much, Inouye. That was beautiful, and we greatly appreciate your very gracious words. Welcome, everyone. It's lovely to see you. Aloha. Established in 2005 by the UH Board of Regents, the Dan and Maggie Inouye Distinguished Chair in Democratic Ideals brings significant public figures to Hawaii to foster the public discourse regarding democratic ideals and civic engagement. The program honors U.S. Senator Daniel Inouye and his wife Maggie for their lifetime of public service. Former Inouye chairs include acclaimed political activist and author Angela Davis, ACLU National Legal Director David Cole, Pulitzer Prize-winning novelist Viet Thanh Nguyen, and more. The Inouye Chair is administered jointly by the Department of American Studies in the College of Arts, Language, and Letters and the William S. Richardson School of Law. Julian Aguon is the Fall 2024 Dan and Maggie Inouye Distinguished Chair in Democratic Ideals. I'd like to offer a few more words of gratitude. Thank you so much to the Inouye Chair Committee for your fine selection. Thank you to the UH Foundation. And of course, thank you as well to the Better Tomorrow Speaker Series team who pulled tonight's event together. It's now my great honor to introduce a dear friend, Julian Aguon. Julian is an Indigenous human rights lawyer and writer from Guam. He is an award-winning author of several books and articles, including To Hell with Drowning, which in 2022 earned him a Pulitzer Prize recognition. He is also the author of No Country for Eight-Spot Butterflies, a beautiful book that has been praised by everyone from Arundhati Roy and Alice Walker to Rebecca Solnit and Tommy Orange. A proud 2009 graduate of the William S. Richardson School of Law, Julian is truly a visionary. He is the visionary behind Blue Ocean Law, a progressive firm that works across Oceania at the intersection of Indigenous rights and environmental justice. I had the great honor of spending time with Julian there in his office a couple of weeks ago, and it was a true gift to see his brilliance at work. Julian has worked for years to defend the rights of self-determination of people across multiple Pacific Island countries and territories, including Guam, the Northern Mariana Islands, French Polynesia, West Papua, Marshall Islands, and Papua New Guinea. For the past 5 years, Julian and his team have served as legal counsel to the Republic of Vanuatu, which has spearheaded the historic pursuit of an advisory opinion on climate change from the International Court of Justice. Julian also serves on the Global Advisory Council of Progressive International. His talk this evening is entitled, On Earning Hope for the Future. Please join me in welcoming Julian Aguon to the podium.
Thank you so much. Can you all hear me well? Can you hear me? Thank you so much, Dean Camille Nelson. She's wonderful. Let's give her a round of applause again. Thank you so much for that beautiful introduction. Also, because everyone else apparently has been thanked, I will just thank all of you for being here. I know we all live busy lives, so it really is an honor that you would all choose to spend the evening with us, and I'm very, very grateful. So with that, I'll just begin. And before I do, I'll let you know that this is sort of in lieu of a traditional lecture. It's the introduction of a new book that I am writing, and no one in the world has heard it yet, so I hope you enjoy it. There is a village at the mouth of a river in the Gulf province of Papua New Guinea that is on the move. Again, the people of Varibari, whose ancestors have lived along the banks of the Kakori River for tens of thousands of years, have already moved 4 times due to sea level rise. This will be their 5th and final climate-induced relocation. Final, because there is no more inland to go. A planning committee has been formed to handle the logistics. Among other things, the villagers are debating how best to relocate the remains of their deceased relatives. Storm surges have already begun washing away the dead. The people of Varibari want nothing more than to stay, but climate change is making that option impossible. With rising seas having swallowed their schools and homes and inundated what's left of the arable land. Unable to adapt at the pace at which their natural environment is changing. Even their rich repository of traditional knowledge, replete with stories about the turbulent wind and waves unique to that river delta, has not been enough of an aid. Looking out at a world they no longer recognize, they have little choice but to leave. The toll this has taken is hard to describe. These villagers have no migration story. They did not come from somewhere else. They came from Varibari, as did everyone else. In other words, they believe themselves to be the caretakers of one of the birthplaces of human civilization. Their sense of duty runs deep, so deep it drives them into the water in the dead of night during king tides to stop debris from slamming into the poles that keep their homes up, despite the fact that those same waters are teeming with crocodiles, and that those same crocodiles have already claimed some of their lives. Suffice it to say, they are fighting for more than their physical homes. They are fighting to stave off spiritual deprivation. They are fighting for the right to live in the world on their own terms, and their children's right to do the same. And the fight is on across the blue continent we call Oceania. In Fiji, for instance, the government keeps an official list of villages it considers to be the most vulnerable to the adverse effects of climate change. These communities, mostly coastal, are viewed as viable candidates for government-facilitated relocation. There are now 42 villages on this list, though officials often call it a working list, as a growing number are being considered for inclusion. Interestingly, the village of Togoru, somewhat famous for footage of a submerged graveyard that went viral, is not among the 42. This is because the people of that village, after an extensive consultative process, voiced their vehement objection to the prospect of moving. In effect, they have vowed to go down with the proverbial ship, giving new life to the old expression, come hell or high water. In the Marshall Islands, much to the chagrin of the International Monetary Fund, the people have likewise rejected the prospect of mass relocation. Just last year, a survey done over 123 days across 15 islands and atolls confirmed that the only adaptation the Marshallese are interested in is in-place adaptation. Despite worsening conditions, rising seas, increasingly frequent drought, growing food insecurity, they have no intention of leaving their traditional lands, lands that bind them not only to the earth, but also to each other. To be sure, the land tenure system in the Marshall Islands is one of the most complex in the world, with almost all land being subject to 4 sets of interests, according to the different clans and the intricate web of reciprocal duties owed. On the island of Tanna, in Vanuatu, there is a community who struggle to hold on to their cultural traditions in the face of climate change. It is so distressing. I have been unable to write about it until now. Yakel is one of the few custom villages left in the country, meaning its indigenous inhabitants have never been dispossessed of their ancestral territories, and so continue to live traditional lifestyles. Members of my team went to this village because our firm is representing Vanuatu before the International Court of Justice in the advisory proceedings now underway on state obligations in respect of climate change. We had been gathering testimony for months and were told repeatedly by our partners that Yakel could not be missed. Among the things that became clear during our visit was the true extent of the loss these villagers have already suffered due to a destabilizing climate. Tanna means soil or earth. Once the most fertile island in all of Vanuatu, Tanna has long been famous for the health of its soil and, in particular, the girth of its giant tubers, including yam, taro, sweet potato. So integral are these tubers to the indigenous culture that nearly all their legends, as well as their ceremonies, are about them or involve their use. While each of these tubers is important and used for multiple purposes apart from physical sustenance, yam is chief among them, king of the root crops. Today, the yam is gone. In fact, there has not been a single successful yam harvest in 4 years. According to the gardeners we spoke with, Many aspects of their physical environment have drastically changed in recent years, making it impossible for yam to grow. The sun, hotter, is burning their leaves. The rain, heavier, is destroying their roots. Landslides, like intense cyclones, are occurring more frequently, exacerbating the problem. The people of Yakel have tried everything to restore the yam. They've planted it on raised beds. They've planted it out of season. They've planted it on neighboring mountains. Nothing took. Some explain what is happening on this mountain as a mental health crisis. That is close, but not close enough to the truth. The yam is to Yakel what the olive tree is to Palestine. It is the people's most sacred symbol. It is the central component of many of their sacred ceremonies, so central that some ceremonies are no longer performed in the yam's absence. Some dances no longer danced, including the toka, which is the dance that enables them to choose their rightful chief. There is a man, 78 years old at the time of this writing, who blames himself, at least in part, for this misfortune. In Yakel, the people believe that certain family lineages have been endowed with special gifts, which take the form of a sacred connection to a particular plant or animal. The gifted ones are called tupunis. This man, whose name is Mangao, is the tupunis of the yam. It is almost impossible to describe the extent to which he feels responsible for its fate. The depth of duty he feels to rectify the situation humbles me. The image of him retreating to the outskirts of the village to pray, that is, to consult the sacred stones bequeathed to him by his father and his father's father before him, haunts me still. I've spent the past year gathering stories like these. Stories from across our sea of islands. Stories about the myriad harms caused by climate change, as well as the myriad ways in which people are pushing through or trying to, fighting tooth and nail, not merely to survive, but to survive whole. I've seen a lot. I've seen some communities persist, even triumph, in the face of what seemed like insurmountable odds. I've seen others try but fail to find their collective footing, particularly after an extreme weather event or other calamity. I felt even more. I felt rage and anguish and wonder and joy, and each of them acutely. I've tried to feel everything fully. This book is my attempt to put all of it to use in order to tell a new story about the climate crisis. Because only a new story can call us. Only a new story can compel us to do what needs to be done. Only a new story can call a new world into being. What I've written here is mostly memoir, and mostly because I could not outrun the truth that anything worth sharing, anything that could be called insight, must be culled from the light of my own life. Insight is nothing if not the fruit of lived experience. I am also too close to the subject matter to feign distance. I am an Indigenous and colonized member of a climate-vulnerable community. I am also a human rights lawyer whose law firm is making the case for climate reparations at the world's highest court on behalf of Vanuatu. If distance be a ship, it sailed. Memoir is also the best vehicle by which to do what I most want to do. That is, to smuggle into the climate change conversation an entirely new level of intimacy. In a word, intimacy is what this conversation has lacked sorely all these years. Its absence, so conspicuous in most of the writing on climate change, leaves us little more than daunted and depressed. That the sky is falling is, at best, only half of the story, and not the half that helps. Despair is not an analysis, as my friend Rebecca Solnit likes to say, nor is it a catalyst for collective action, which is what we need most. Despair is a gluttonous God we must stop feeding. I am convinced that if we are to have any hope in the future, we must start by telling stories about our own small corners of the earth as we know them and as we love them. My corner is called Micronesia, and it consists of the many islands and atolls which pepper the northwestern half of the Pacific Ocean. Micronesia has 4 main archipelagos, namely the Caroline Islands, the Gilbert Islands, the Marshall Islands, and the Mariana Islands. I come from the last of the 4. I come from Guam, the ancestral home of the Chamorro people. As I explain in the pages that follow, Chamorros value relationships over everything. Our highest cultural value is reciprocity. In fact, we have more words for reciprocity than any other word in our language. I come then from a people who have something rich to add to the treasury which our shared vocabulary must become if we are to succeed in the project of building a better world. Smallness is a state of mind. Those words were written at a time when the peoples of the Pacific were only beginning to reawaken to the abundance that is our birthright. They were written by the Tongan writer Apeli Hauofa, whom many of us consider to be the greatest public intellectual this part of the world ever produced. He did for Pacific peoples what James Baldwin did for Black people. He loved us enough to tell us the truth. For Micronesians in particular, whose islands are discursively dismissed as the small islands, the truth is that there is nothing small about the intellectual and aesthetic bounty from which we come. Nothing paltry about the rich cultural traditions that have enabled us to flourish in these islands all these years. One such tradition, alive and well in the Caroline Islands, is the send-off. Although it goes by different names on different islands, this is the celebration that takes place when a community sends off its navigators. In traditional navigation, which we call wayfinding, sailing from one place to another is done only by the light of celestial bodies. No compass or other instrument of the modern world is used. This is why wayfinding is sometimes referred to as a system of celestial or non-instrument navigation. In any event, the centerpiece of the celebration, apart from the chants, is the gift that is given to the navigators as they launch their canoe into the water, a crown of flowers called a marmar. A marmar is a headpiece made of delicate flowers that take a painstaking amount of time to weave well. They are usually woven by the women of the village and presented to the men as a gift for the journey ahead. Unlike other forms of floral art, the marmar is made with deep spiritual affection, as everyone knows that the navigator's journey is the most perilous of all. With the open ocean as their terrain, there is no certainty that the men will make it back. There is no guarantee of return. To wayfind is to risk, to bet on the future, to know that the future is never promised, only hoped for, only earned. That is why the woman put so much care into weaving these flower crowns, because beauty is our love language. That is also why, in addition to flowers, turmeric powder is placed on the navigator's person. Death is the only other occasion where this is done. This celebration is also a goodbye. The ability to hold space for these two things at once, that is, the love of life and the grace to let it go, is common among Micronesians. Perhaps that is because we have done far more than our fair share of dying. This is spectacularly true in the case of my people, the Chamorros of Guam. We die in spades. One could argue that this business of dying began in 1898 when the United States seized the island as a spoil of the Spanish-American War. But that is only one way of looking at it. It could also be argued that it actually began hundreds of years ago, long before the arrival of the United States, before the United States was the United States, before Chief Hurrah gave his glorious speech in the streets of Hagatna, before the first black-robed Spanish priest baptized the first naked baby, before Tuman Bay ever turned red with the blood of Father Diego Luis de Salvatores, before Chief Mataping shoved a spear through his Bible-thumping chest. All this to say, my people are done dying. Now is the time to live. Thank you. Okay, everyone in the audience, please indulge us for 1 second. We're going to do a selfie because we promised that we would. Okay, let's do it here. Smile. Smile. So inappropriate. Okay. Yep.
As you're getting situated, as you're getting situated, right? I mean, just, that was so beautiful. It was, I'm a bit emotional because it's your ability to tell stories and to share is so powerful, Julian, that it's so vivid, right? I mean, you could see what you're talking about. You can almost smell what you're talking about. And I think that for those of us in the law, you know, in law school and as practicing attorneys and judges, we often talk about the subjective and the objective, and often the objective gets more of the limelight. It's seen as distant, third party, neutral, untouched by the personal, the emotional, the spiritual. And I think so much of your work and what you shared with us centers the subjective, but it's more than that. It's the fullness of the individual with such empathy and love. And I just want to ask you, you know, right off the bat, how you position yourself as a storyteller and a lawyer and live all facets of your mind, body, spirit in those eloquent words. It's so incredibly eloquent and evocative, and thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you all so much. Honestly, thank you all so much for being here. And thank you for the question. Basically, especially when it comes to climate change, you know, something about the sheer scale of climate change, it's enormity, you know? It's almost sort of impenetrable. And I see this, you know, happening with, especially with young people, which breaks my heart, especially because, and I think it's because climate change is the fight of our lives, but we will not win that fight by way of facts. We might by way of stories. I believe that in some ways that's what needs to happen. That is truly, in some ways we are all sort of buried beneath an avalanche of facts. I feel that way every single time I see an IPCC report. You know, that's the emotion, but I feel like we are in desperate need of a new conversation. we desperately need to quiet down the noise of all of that and find new ways of speaking to each other. I feel like it's so noisy, I can hardly hear myself think. So that's what I'm trying to do with the writing. With the writing, when I'm not in the courtroom and I'm not sort of, and you know how it is with litigation. It's such a necessarily adversarial endeavor. It's A versus B, But with this kind of writing, it matters so much to me because I feel like, unlike legal writing, which is cultivating like the cold precision of an assassin's bullet, writing, writing for other people is like a deeply loving act. It's radically loving, and you are trying to write in order to build a fire to warm up as many bodies as possible. So it's a whole different enterprise.
So how do you combine those two when you are writing with the deep precision of an assassin's bullet in the courtroom? I mean, you are advocating at the highest levels as a litigator who is a trailblazing attorney in the highest court. So how do you combine both that storytelling and that absolute precision that you mentioned?
Thank you. A little bit of daring and a little bit of nerve, In my mind, I'm a drag queen, so I have a lot of nerve,
Well, someone did say diva.
Yeah.
Someone did say diva out there.
No,
right?
for real. No, but seriously, on the real, this is sort of part of the point. Like, when I say daring, I really, really mean it. Like, sometimes I'll, smuggle into, a brief, in a really important footnote that does something else. Something I cannot afford to put in the text, but we still want to preserve, because part of what happens, especially with young lawyers coming out of school and everything, you sort of pick up sort of an unhelpful reflex, and that is you only lawyer within the narrowest possible nook. You just narrow the hell out of it. You narrow, every brief, you just narrow. You find the best thing, and you go so hard, right? And it's fine, and it's ruthless, and it's really efficient in some ways, but you also miss so many things. And for this case in particular, in front of the ICJ, we actually had to do both. We had to be incredibly precise, but we had to interrupt the conversation, the global conversation on climate change, by telling new stories and bringing stories of the harms that are being felt in real time to the world court, so that they will know that it is time to do something new. Even if what they're really doing is sort of setting out with no ambiguity, the legal parameters of all states' obligations as concerns climate change, we all know that they're doing something else as well.
Yes, I have to say, I love it that Julian mentioned footnotes. I always say to our students, read a chair for footnotes. Who wants to chair for bibliographies too, and endnotes? No, but I say that because when you read Julian's work, and I was sharing with him in Guam, reading No Country for Eight-Spot Butterflies, the footnotes are so rich. The footnotes in and of themselves are worthy of reading and rereading. So, you pack so much into your work. And I just want to highly recommend his writing, because anyone who can do that as well, make the footnotes, to quote you, a word that Julian likes to use, as delicious as your footnotes are, is impeccable. But the other thing I want to say is, as you're talking about all of this work you're undertaking, Julian, and the way you're inspiring others who work with you to do it, how did you reconcile that, or how has your journey been in those confines as an attorney, right? You no doubt had a lot of mentors and a lot of people you look to for inspiration, but traditionally, lawyers are not known for, although we are, being creatives and artists and musicians and lyricists, and you're all of those. So I want to hear more about your journey in the law as a creative.
Can I give you an exceedingly concrete example? Just because it won't make any sense to anyone outside my head. So when I'm doing something that's very, very adversarial. For example, I'm writing an appellate brief in front of the Ninth Circuit, and I'm trying to sort of disaggregate race from ancestry for the purposes of insulating a statutory classification from an equal protection challenge. For example, right? I am listening straight up to Nina Simone the whole time. I have these artists, I have these mentors that I called upon. Sometimes it's Bob Marley. Sometimes it's like that line from Bend Down Low. Yeah. You keep on knocking, but you can't come in. Even if he's technically talking not in this, I imagine in my mind he's talking to his opponent, the devil. It's like the analogy being 40 Day, but that is it's like I sort of lean on all the other sort of uncles and aunties and all the other people who've raised me in my beloved community. And part of it is I need artists like that. And I couldn't even do it otherwise. Like, I know that's such a bizarre answer.
No, I think that's
but
a beautiful
it's a real
answer.
answer. Like,
Yeah.
I need to, and sometimes when I'm in the opposite mood, right? And sometimes I need to tamper something down. Like, it's an opposite impulse. It's Sweet Honey in the Rock. It's super different, you know. And that's how I sort of do it, because if I'm going to live a life in the law, if I'm going to do it, I have to do it my own way. And the only way to do that is to sort of lean on to cross all the boundaries, because there's so many. I get my inspiration from so many sources, you know, and I embrace all of them. I let all my ancestors in at once. Like, in my mind, near Inouye right there, Uncle Kekuni Blaisdell is here with us in my heart, because he's so hugely important to my own intellectual development as an activist, you know. And so, like, he's here, and I invite all of them with me. They're with me all the time.
I mean, one of the things that I think I'm struck by when you're sharing that is also the honesty and the candor, right? We all have our ways of engaging our work, and some of us don't share it with such vulnerability and humility and humor. And I just want to celebrate you, because in doing that, you're also inspiring others to find their own ways in whatever work, especially social justice work, which can be so challenging. So, you know, keeping that yourself replenished and your spirit sustained to do this work is really important. So thank you for sharing that, Julian. We appreciate it. I appreciate it. And as you're talking about your cases at the highest levels, I mean, what beyond the, obviously you want a certain doctrinal or substantive outcome on the law, but can you talk about what it is in addition you may hope to achieve as you take on this work, and that case in particular?
Sure. Okay, let me explain I'll take one step back and explain the case a little bit.
Please.
So basically, my really good friend, Minister Ralph Reagan-Vanu, the Minister of Climate Change at the time, and recently again, he sort of approached me and he was like, you know, this is an idea whose time has come. You know, Palau and the Marshall Islands had worked on it, especially in 2011, I believe. And I think they rallied a coalition of roughly 30 countries, and it wasn't enough, and the initiative died for multiple reasons. But we realized in 2019, it was time to sort of pick this up again. So Vanuatu sort of spearheaded this global coalition, you know, that pursued enough votes in the UN General Assembly to ask the World Court questions. So the International Court of Justice is the UN's principal judicial body, and it's authorized to receive requests for legal opinions, but only from certain specialized agencies and also the UN General Assembly. But you need a simple majority, so it's 97 countries. So it's a gargantuan effort, you know, right from the outset. And we're going to do it. We're like, can we commit like roughly 3 to 5 years of our lives to doing this? You know, so the answer had to be yes, and a resolute yes, because otherwise you could just, you know, it's so daunting, the task. But we did it in such a beautiful, sort of efflorescent way, a true activist way. We really did it by paying attention, by sort of, in the beginning, as a first step, ignoring the global north. We turned to our fellow climate vulnerable countries in the global south and said, okay, let's get all of Africa, all of the Caribbean, all of the Pacific. And once the tide really started turning for this case, once the Organization of African, Caribbean, and Pacific States signed on, which is a block of 79 countries. So it gave us all the momentum we needed. And the reason why this is important, and I'll get to the question itself, is because we have asked the court to bring to bear the entirety of international law. If you read the chapeau paragraph, this umbrella paragraph, we've asked the court essentially two things: the sort of about the legal obligations of all countries, right, to avert climate catastrophe, but also what are the legal consequences in the event of a breach of those obligations. So these are really substantive meat and potato questions. There is no fluff there, because we are actually asking the court to do something, to like pronounce on the law, which we believe, of course, goes far beyond the UNFCCC, the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, and the Paris Agreement, which is sort of, the world has sort of been in this place. It's been stuck in this place for such a long time, which is legal ambiguity and sort of like a whole random assortment of more or less non-binding obligations where countries sort of voluntarily pledge to reduce their emissions, none of which has happened. And we're saying, no, enough. Sort of playtime is over. Playtime is over. We need to dispel the legal ambiguity once and for all, you know? But one more. Sorry.
No, this is great because this is the hard law part, right?
Yeah,
Like,
which
this
is also
the
very,
hard
very
substantive
important.
Law. Yeah,
you know?
this is important. Yeah.
So I'll just go a little longer.
Yeah, please.
But basically, we're all go to law school too. No, but apart from the legal outcome, and I'll be very clear, a great legal outcome would be sort of a very clear sort of like exposition for the court to lay out in well-defined and transparent terms the true contour, the true extent of state obligations, as well as pronounce on question 2, which is what happens in the event of breach of those obligations. We want both questions answered. Obviously, a progressive opinion would get the world out of the sort of quagmire that we're in and put us into a new place where, for example, a country, the matter of reducing your greenhouse gas emissions, for example, is no longer discretionary, but one of diligence. Diligence as required by hard rules of international law, meaning you actually have to change your behavior, you know? And so this is what we want. And to answer the last part of your question, what I really want is for this to open the door then to be used by all climate vulnerable communities everywhere, including members of the future generations. Intergenerational equity was a huge component of this case from the onset, and that's because of the passionate, fierce, and uber competent advocacy of a group of law students, mostly from the Pacific, that organized themselves into a group called Pacific Island Students Fighting Climate Change.
You know, that's a beautiful answer, and I'm so grateful because it shows you the myriad contours of the work you're doing, and that's one of the reasons we're so deeply appreciative, as you mentioned, students, right? And groups of law students. We're so appreciative that you'll be teaching at Richardson Law. Would you share a little bit about your energy around that, especially coming back home to your home at law school?
Oh yeah, I just saw Dean Toshiki over there and I was like almost died. You know, because it's been so long since I've seen her. You know, and so many of the other members of the community I've seen, former deans, former teachers, Susan Kapua, Linda, the list goes on, but so many other people who had such a huge part, you know, of helping me sort of step into my own power, not only as a lawyer, but as a person, you know, and really sort of being comfortable sort of in the entirety of myself and and being really sort of unapologetic about that. All these people, you know, formed me, now to return in this capacity as a peer, you know, is really humbling. And I'm so honored to sort of be back at our law school at Richardson and to really teach the students. I mean, I love teaching so much. I've taught remotely on and off, but this will be my first time teaching in person. So I'm stoked. Like I really want to do it. Yeah.
It's going to be great. One of the questions from the audience, I know I'm jumping a little around because I saw this question come up, and I think it's on point. Do you take hope from the youth plaintiff case on climate change, like in Hawaii and Montana? And what would you say, Julian, to the youth in the audience and online picking up the torch to fight against climate crises?
Oh, 100% support. You know, I just feel like it's so clear, you know, I feel like in so many ways the global climate justice movement is largely led by the youth. I mean, it's really because they don't, you know, they see the world so clearly and they have a watch and they know what time it is. You know, I feel like youth are really aware in ways that the older generation is like insanely unaware of. I mean, I've been in rooms too. I've been in rooms with many of these groups. Yeah, we even filed an amicus in that other recent case. My firm, we've seen this litigation pop up. And sometimes you file a case even if you believe maybe it's a long shot or you won't succeed in terms of narrow legal outcome. But as we teach at Richardson, courts are also sites of cultural performance. We know that sometimes we are challenging the law. Sometimes we are showing up, understanding that we might lose in terms of narrow legal outcome, but win a long game. Like, I mean, that's part of what we are all doing. That's why I love the work, and I've been molded by the work of like outfits like Center for Constitutional Rights in New York. I mean, there's so many I could name who are just doing the damn thing. They know what they're doing, even when they know it's a long shot, but they're forcing the law to move, you know, to be relevant, to keep up with the time. So I'm 100% supportive of all of these cases that really feature intergenerational equity.
And you're a true activist as well. And I want to highlight that because there are many ways to make the law move. And sometimes we focus on one fora as lawyers, but we don't also recognize that there are multiple overlapping fora that can be brought to bear, if leveraged correctly, to make the law move. And I wonder if you might touch on some of those, because I know you've been also doing a lot of media engagements. You are very engaged in multiple spaces and multiple times all over the world doing this work. In and outside of the courtroom is my point. Yeah.
No, I guess just simple answer is yes. I mean, we do sort of a lot. I mean, in part because, it's like, everyone likes their own fried rice, We all need, I like salted fish fried rice from Little Village, which is now closed. I just found out it's closed. And I'm secretly dying inside because I love that fried rice. So my point is, sorry, I like food too, a lot. But I'm being facetious, but the truth is, I feel like we're all sort of like precious about it. Like we're so precious about our professions. Like I'm so much more porous, and so I'm comfortable. I want to transgress your boundary. I appreciate all the other people who are doing that work and realizing that the law is one thing and it's really good, and on occasion it can be magnificent. But that's all it is. It's one specific pathway toward the change that we need to see in the world. And I love that when there's artist gatherings, for example, the upcoming hearings, the oral proceedings begin on December 2nd at the Peace Palace in The Hague, in this case that we're talking about. But a whole contingency of global artists, including many youth artists, are coming also because they understand that this is what it's about. We have to have a very robust, interdisciplinary climate justice movement if we're going to be successful. So yes, I invite all of that.
Yes, and you embody so much of it. I mean, before everybody came in, Julian was up here singing on the stage for the mic check. And, you started out by singing, Sam Cooke, right? I mean, I was born by the river. I mean, so there are so many spaces that I feel that porousness. And I think that's what really, is one of the ways in which you are so well situated to do this work, which is interdisciplinary by definition.
Yeah. And I think also, to add on to that, Camille, I think the other issue is that the times are so complicated that they really do require a kind of intellectual athleticism. We have to be cheetahs on the move. We have to think on our feet in a spectacular sense, and we are out of time. And so we have to pull up, all of us. All of us have to.
Yes, yes. One of the things that I love too is this activism and this fluidity and this athleticism is demonstrated in your writing. And so, if we could pivot slightly, although I know it's interconnected, to your work as an author, as a public intellectual, can we talk a little bit about your journey as, a public school educated, kid, right? Who I saw in his office, he devours books. I mean, littered with beautiful books. I mean, just everywhere. And just share a little bit about that part of you and your soul with us.
Thank you. I like these questions. They're so free-ranging.
None of these are written. He's like, she's way off script.
No, I love
this. She's way off script.
No, I love this. I feel like because the cage is gone, and now we're roaming, But but the truth is, a set of interns of mine, like from two summers ago, they're like, why do you have so many novels in here? Like, they're like, I get the nonfiction, but why all the novels? I was like, fiction. Oh, why? Like oxygen, you need them. And I think it's like, I'll just say something really specific about novels because they sort of, to get out the question. Novels are not about facts, they're about truth. That's why we need them, And there's even people in the audience, I see some of the most gifted poets in the audience, here tonight, and I rely on them. Even though it was right here, I'm literally thinking of Asta Brindled right now, her poetry collection, which helped revive me in ways that I wasn't even aware of. And and there's so many more. But the point is, I think for so long we have been undernourished because we have been misled somehow into believing that we can only take our nourishment from one kind of rain. I think Hawaiians have so many words for rain, don't they? I don't know. I love it here so much. I'm living my best Kama'aina fantasy right now. No, I'm so happy to be here. You have no idea. I am truly, this place, this soil, this land is so important to me. So much of who I am sort of also came not only from my homeland of Guam, which, is my home, but Hawaii also has meant so much to me and my development. And as a person who is sort of okay, sort of unfurling in this way and sort of taking my nourishment from all of these different sources.
And some of the sources that you take your nourishment from, I was struck by, are womanist writers, right? I mean, when you read Julian's work, there's so many references to just fierce women, incredibly fierce women. And where did that reverence originate?
There's so many. I'll try to keep it short.
No, don't. You
No,
don't
I
have
don't
to.
know.
This is your night. This is
I
no.
feel
We
so-
want to
No,
hear.
because I also, there's so many women in my life, who have been, especially, women of color. I mean, I think the very first person that popped in my mind is my grandmother, my mother's mother, and just the fact that she was a fisherman and all this sort of how I learned about her so later in life because, like so many of our people, she suffered from, what we call Litikobodig. It's like the hideous stepchild of like Lou Gehrig's disease and ALS. It's a Guam specific thing. It's like an insane sort of rabbit hole to go down when you realize how Guam was so afflicted by this disease in such a completely mysterious way to all people who study neurodegeneration. Like no one understands this. They even say that if they find the cure to this disease, it will be the skeleton key to understanding all other similar diseases. But anyway, I think about my grandmother and just sort of like in the end, and I think about all of the other women who did all they could with all they had, which was very little, right? And they somehow, that's the first kind of magic I ever learned. The magic of doing something with nothing, with feeding a family, all of that magic. It's like my first taste of sort of what, and of course it's always unfair, I think, who was the writer that said women of color are always having to bridge the gap between blindness and humanity? Like, was it? I can't, there's so many people in the audience who know that. Audre Lorde? I think that's right. But I've taken so much inspiration from the people in my family, also, and all the other people, even my husband's mother, who also I've learned so much about later in life. So and I think it abounds. And I think if you look around, and also some of the best writing, the most sort of transformative writing have been works. Like I remember, way, way, way back when I was a very baby feminist. I think I read this Bridge Called My Back. I read all the sort of classics,
I hear the snaps.
But
I hear the snaps.
no, it's just because they've all, I cannot say.
But Julie, you have to be willing to listen, right? In Jamaica we say listen hard, right? Listen hard to what's said, but also what's not said, because people are intentionally leaving that off the table, right? They know how to say it, but they've chosen not to say it. Statutory interpretation 101 as well, right? But you say radical listening. And that's part of radical love. And what I'm hearing is that you also, those are some hard lessons to learn, but you have to be willing to listen to the aunties and the grandmas, right?
Yes, absolutely. And honestly, the way I've come to define radical listening for myself is listening to those whose lives are more precarious than our own, listening to the most vulnerable. There's, who wrote the Looking to the Bottom? I'm thinking about so many sources at once.
Derek Bell.
Yeah, but
Faces at the Bottom?
But it's just so, or even Alchemical Notes. There's so many, and I think
Patricia
even in our discipline, in critical legal scholarship, so many amazing authors, so many amazing insights, and that is, I don't know, it is always about listening.
I feel that what you're saying might inform this question. How should the trauma imposed on children as a result of the uncertainty of climate change, loss of their homes, cultures, and futures, be included in climate change, whether it's through litigation in state courts, international courts, or other bodies with power to interpret the law?
Wow. And that is a cavernous
sort of getting
question.
to the impact of trauma.
Yeah,
right?
that's cavernous. Yeah. It really is, in some ways, so big, and so hard to answer. But for example, one of the things that we're trying to do in our brief with our other client, Melanesian Spearhead Group, which Vanuatu is a part of, we are bringing the voices of these villagers directly to the court. It's so that they can hear firsthand the ways in which climate change is actively sort of unraveling the very fabric of life. Like the yam story that I spoke about in this village in Vanuatu, it's a really concrete example of this. Like climate change is having, in real time, all of these effects. Some of the things I left out, by virtue of what you include, you leave out so much more. We have this whole sort of day that we spent with so many women in the village who got together and were so generous and gracious to share their stories. They were having strokes because they can't even reach the gardens to do the gardening. And also the landslides that are happening with increasing frequency. Actual strokes, and all of these stories. And when, for 8 years before we did this ICJ case, we were, as a firm, we were almost singularly focused on sort of opposing the emergent extractive industry known as seabed mining. And so when we were doing that work, I'll give you another concrete example about the listening. It goes back to the last question, but I want to share this example. So many of these international lawyers for the International Seabed Authority, which is the monitoring body created by the treaty to oversee the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea for purposes of harvesting mineral wealth at the bottom of the sea, right? This is a long story, but a lot of people said, like, basically, there are no human rights violations with this new extractive industry because the relevant activities are happening in the areas beyond national jurisdiction. So international, in the high seas, right? So in the international area, it's called the area. I'm trying to make this simpler. But, sorry, it's a little complicated, but I'll try to just say this. Basically, we said no. The analysis doesn't turn on where the activities, these mining or even prospecting activities are happening. The analysis turns on where their effects are being felt. And they were being felt by indigenous communities along the coast of Papua New Guinea in real time. For example, the women of Lavongai Island in PNG, if we weren't listeners, we can't be good lawyers if we're not good listeners. Yes. So if I didn't really stop talking and hear this story, I couldn't translate it as a human rights violation. So the women of this Lavongai Island, they basically were saying that this one Canadian-based company had a prospecting permit for a channel of water that, per their cultural teachings, is the exact channel of water where they actually have to make the jump into the afterlife. So talk about how acute the distress was, because they feared that they would be unable to join their deceased relatives in the other world. And that is a human rights violation of the highest order, and we can't, and that's why we have to listen first, because if we're not listening, we don't understand the true nature of the harm.
Yeah, and then you have to translate
it into what the law can recognize.
Right.
Because the law doesn't recognize everything,
Yes. So let me ask you, would you ever, again, totally off script, would you ever think about being a judge or a justice who would recognize the translations that you all would make in your appeals and your litigation before his court? I just wonder, do you ever think about that?
No.
Okay.
No, I
think short answer.
Yeah. I don't even think I have the temperament for that job. Like, I don't think I would have a chance. Of ever getting past first base on that job. But yes, but also no, just because, I want to do other things.
Yes. And so speak about the other things. And let me ask, would you ever write a novel? You mentioned about the truth coming out?
I do. I'll share the one idea because it's the only idea that came to me, and this was like 5 years in the making. I have this book about an indigenous people, but it's a fiction. It's a novel, clearly, but it's an indigenous people who are connected not by blood, by a shared heart murmur. And I want the entire book to be sort of a meditation on empathy. But that's what the novel. And I have all of these characters, and they're kind of like swimming toward me. And I'm like seeing them, but I'm also like holding them at bay, because I'm also like, I gotta get this case done. I have to do this other thing, and then one other thing after that, and then I can pay attention to them. But I feel like they're coming at me, so it's difficult.
Yes, yes. It might be a part of the project here while you're also, as part of the chair, you can start the novel, and if they're coming at you and into your dream space, and maybe. Yeah. Are there other cases as well, though, in addition to the novel that you're working on?
You mean cases? Legal cases?
Legal cases, separate from the soon forthcoming novel. But
I have a dream case. That no one's done yet. I would love to work with actually some of the lawyers in the room. I even saw. Marty couldn't make it tonight, and I don't think Isaac's here, but Kupu and Earth Justice and David Kimo Franco and all these other lawyers we're all doing environmental work. I would want to sue the U.S. for the leaking nuclear dome in the Marshall Islands. Yeah.
Is that a possibility?
I'll just say one last thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely. Okay. Say whatever you want. Absolutely.
Just so you all know, like perhaps more than any other country on the face of the planet, the Republic of the Marshall Islands sits squarely at the intersection of unresolved nuclear harm and the adverse effects of climate change. So storm surge is already breaking down this barrier, which is hardly a barrier, of what's called the Runit Dome. It's telling that locals call it the tomb. It's where basically all of the radioactive waste was scraped with pickup trucks, driven to this one crater created by one of the U.S.'s bombs, dumped there and capped with concrete. And it's leaking currently into the surrounding lagoon. I would like to sue the U.S. for that. Yeah.
You have support for that. Yeah. Yep. And as you think about the cases that you presently have and the cases that you would like to have, do you think the law as it sits is capable of addressing these matters? Like, can we dust off the archaic legal doctrine, dress it up, or do we need new law? Right? Do we need to evolve something through translation? I'm interested in hearing your thoughts on what's possible.
Both. I think
and.
both and. Yeah, we absolutely need to. I mean, the first thing, when you said dust off, I immediately thought of the CCR, Center for Constitutional Rights in New York, which dusted off the Alien Tort Statute. This very, very old statute that no one was using. And they dusted it off and said, we are going to bring violations for the law of nations in federal district courts. And it was like, bam. You saw all of Philartiga and all of a wave of human rights litigation in the district courts. And I think there are opportunities. This Runit case may be one, but there are more. And that requires the dusting off, but we also need you. We also need you.
I like that very much, and because that also speaks to the next generation and the creative work and the envisioning, which is so much a part of what you share, is the possibility of creating a new out of old, and but bringing the old into the new. One of the questions that I think is also resonant with what you're sharing is, how might the law and stories need to evolve to address new claims and harms like intergenerational trauma? Is there a way to do that?
Could you repeat the question?
Sure. How might the law and stories need to evolve to address new claims and harms like intergenerational trauma?
Yeah.
Is there a way to do that?
Well, in some ways, yeah. I mean, yes, because we're doing that now. Like, there's so many actual, like, climate litigators right now who are doing just that, They're expanding. I mean, one of the assignments that I think all lawyers across at least so many law firms, I'm talking about everyone from Earth Rights International to Earth Justice to, like, different outfits, even CL. And there's so many litigators out there who are trying to, for example, right now, as I speak, looking at the full panoply of traditional tort law, even like all the elements for all the torts, and are actually trying to expand sort of the scope of all of the torts as we currently know them. So like that's just one example, right?
Can I just say, law school, first year, really important.
Yeah, no, torts, take torts. Take torts. No, it's, just such an important, and I'm like so excited. I'm so excited because there's so much I haven't thought about. There's so many things, so many briefs that I'm like luckily privy to, because, I know people who are considering sort of like ambitious litigation in various parts of the world. And I think, for example, the tort litigation, I think there's a new generation of tort litigation coming. I don't know who would bring it exactly, but I believe it's coming because, there's enough talk in the community about expanding sort of the tort law as we know it and applying it to the new set of facts. Intergenerational equity, all of it, it's like all of sort of the intentional infliction, right?
Yes,
emotional distress. There's
yep.
multiple ways that we can sort of skin this cat and get there and move toward this. But I already see so many people doing it right now, and so I'm just so happy to see it.
And you're in community, as you said. You see the community doing. Can you speak about this community of people doing this type of work and the energy there?
Yeah, there's just so many people doing good work. Right here in Hawaii, and also throughout the country and throughout the world. And I've just been able to, I would say one of the blessings of this case and working on this case for 5 years is I've managed to meet so many different people who are still so excited about their lives in the law. And they're not in the evening of their life, they're in the morning of their life. And that is so markedly different when you see someone who's in the morning of their life in the law and sort of incredibly, gifted, and they're even in a few years out of school. I already see them do that thing where it's not cumbersome, it's not like it's smooth, and you see how clear and clean their thinking is. But then when they sort of come at you with all these other sort of novel ideas, then that's when I really get going, because that's the moments I'm most excited as sort of part-time law professor, with Susan, all these years, it's those moments when you see students sort of awakening to the law's potential. It's quite a thing.
Can you talk about your awakening to the law's potential? Because, truly, Julian's law firm is extraordinary. And you're still very young, but you created that firm, Blue Ocean Law, when you weren't that senior out of law school, let's put it that way. Can you talk about that awakening and that journey to create your own thing? almost,
Yeah.
that was within 10 years?
Within a what? 10 years of what?
Graduation.
Oh, 2 years.
2 years.
Yeah, it was a little bit crazy. I was crazy. I don't even suggest people follow my model, like, because I'm not a good template. But
Yeah, I think it's a great model.
But the truth is, I just want to be honest, so I'm going to answer this very sort of directly. I took a hard look around me in Guam, in my own community, what I had on offer, and I thought really, really honestly, I was honest with myself, and I was like, is there anyone else whose life in the law I emulated or necessarily wanted? And the answer was no. Not doing this particular work. And it's the crossover, it's that meeting point, it's the intersection. I'm not only interested, for example, in straight environmental litigation. I'm not even interested in that. I'm interested in that moment when it meets, when the cause of environmental justice meets the cause of Indigenous rights. It's truly that corner. I live on that corner. That's the work that most excites me. And so when I really took a sobering look around, I realized that there was no model for this. I knew I had to build it, because then it would be a house that other people can live in too. So I have made it my personal mission to try to mentor as many, especially young Indigenous Islanders too. Like, we also just had 2 interns from this school, Dio and Danielle. They just finished their internships with our firm. They're Richardson students.
Yep.
And I'm trying so hard, to make this a place where we can, I want the room to be wide enough for everyone.
And it should be. And I think that's a beautiful lesson as well. I mean, I think it rings hollow without proof of concept that you can do this when we say carve your own path, right? What's necessary and is what is not being achieved, and think about your way to do that in service of others. And you've done it, Julian. You did it very quickly. Can you share some of the non-legal or pre-legal work then, or opportunities or experiences that allowed you to be so catalytic within a couple of years to create your own thing and do this phenomenal work?
Wow. Okay. No. Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, so Julian's done many, many things in terms of work intersecting with the law, service work in India. He's done all sorts of things before law school, during law school, and still, that I think were foundational perhaps to your ability to know what you want to do and to do it, and to do it so effectively.
Yeah. I've done very, very random things in my life, but in part because I'm in pursuit of understanding. Like, I don't know how else to say it, but I know that the law cannot give me everything that I need, but I was luckily I knew that early on. I knew it enough, and so I sought out mentors who helped me see that it was possible, and so many of them, there's too many to name, but I see a few in the audience, and one just gave her regard, Jennifer Rose. You used to be the gender equity specialist. She was a huge mentor of mine. I see Auntie Maimon Lam there. There's many people here, and they all sort of helped me see part of what you need as a young person. I know this might sound, I don't know, to everyone, but you really do need a community of elders who love you enough to point you in the direction that they know you need to go. And sometimes those are hard conversations, but they point you lovingly, but sometimes firmly, in the direction. And I try to do that with my students now. I try to do that with all of our interns. But yeah, there's too many experiences and things to mention, but also my activism. My activism really has this sort of direct influence, obviously, on the work I do as an activist lawyer, because I think it's the time for sort of pretending that we, neutrality in so many respects. The time sort of feigning that is really over, and if we're honest about that, I think we can all save each other a lot, not only a lot of time, but a lot of grief. Yeah.
And that's a hard thing for lawyers to say.
Oh, a lot of lawyers.
Neutrality is over.
Yeah. No, I know.
Maybe that's why you don't want to be a judge.
Do you see what I'm saying? I lack the a judicial temperament. Yeah. All my best friends no. Yeah.
So there is a question that brings us back to the Vanuatu case. So is the strategy to use the case to bring attention to the issue, or do you think do you have any predictions on the outcome of the case? I know that's hard to do, but there's a third prong, and you can speak to all of these in turn, or just answer as you see fit. what is the best case scenario if you do win in terms of enforcement?
Thank you so much for all of those questions. Okay, I'll just very quickly explain. You know, the court has competence over two kinds of cases, right? You have contentious cases, right, which the outcome of which is binding. It's one state versus another, versus what we're doing here, which is an advisory opinion. You know, so we're asking for the court to finally decisively dispel any remaining legal ambiguity surrounding state obligations when it comes to climate change, sort of the relevant conduct. So the acts and omissions of states over time, which has caused catastrophic harm in the form of climate change and its adverse effects. We're asking the court to sort of evaluate the target conduct under a wide corpus of international law. So what I mean is we're not just asking that evaluation to happen under the climate change regime, so under the UNFCCC or the Paris Agreement. We're asking that the court to evaluate the legality of the target conduct under a wide range, so international human rights, all of international environmental law, fundamental rules, so not just treaty-based, but customary international law. You know, so what a desired outcome, of course, would be that the court actually really hews close to the chapeau paragraph and actually delivers an answer that includes, you know, reference to that wide range of international law, including international law of general application. You know, and we would like the court to ideally reach and answer sufficiently the second question, which is about legal consequences, which is really about the sort of general international law of state responsibility. So this is essentially is reparations and all that entails, you know, restitution, compensation, satisfaction. So this is a real opportunity for the court to unlock the power of international law once and for all to help the human race avert climate catastrophe. Yeah.
That's a great answer. That's a great answer. So what do you think we can do in Hawaii to be helpful and supportive of your efforts in this regard?
Well, thank you for inviting me here. No, just being part of it, taking an active part of it. I mean, there's no reason why, you know, especially the legal community, the civil society community, again, legal and extra legal. It would be nice to get all kinds of, like, we want a huge presence, for example, by global civil society. We're inviting everyone. We would like everyone to descend, you know, onto the Netherlands for when this case starts, not to be in the courtroom, but to be part of the larger conversation, because again, the law can only deliver part, right? It's only part of the thing. So we still need all the stories. We still need all the activists. We still need all the artists to sort of bring to the table all the other things.
So a second part of that question, what are Hawaii's obligations to our Pacific Island siblings that are facing climate cataclysm first?
Wow, that's a great question, and so many. And I know so many people work at the Ledge and other places here who can answer that question better than me. But I think, you know, this is sort of difficult, but, you know, there are moments, you know, when a young boy, you know, it's a hard question to answer. But I just feel like there could be greater history lessons. I believe, like many residents of Hawaii, unfairly attribute so much of sort of what they claim are the problems on other, like, migrant communities, as opposed to the party responsible for the underlying grievances. No, but honestly, this is real talk. You know, some of these problems are irrefutably American in origin. The federal government has made a series of decisions which have put people in precarious positions. You know, so Hawaii needs to recognize that, and that would be a great first step. The other really concrete answer is something I found out that just happened, for at least for online education. That, for example, I just found out a week ago that Richardson, right, is extending in-state tuition for residents of Guam. You have no idea what a big deal. I told like 30 people about this in the last 10 days. So many people want to go to law school. We don't have a law school in so many of the other, at least in my community, we don't have this opportunity. It was hard. It would be sort of cost prohibitive. You know, I also consider not going to law school at all because of the cost. And that really showing up, not just with words, but with real concrete things. That is a big deal. Showing up with and understanding that material conditions have to be an issue. They have to factor in.
Yeah, thank you for that, and thank you. For lifting up the new Hawaii Online JD program, because part of the Richardson Law School mission is a responsibility to the state and to the larger Pacific region. So we are actualizing that and trying to lift that up and embrace it.
Yeah.
So thank you for that.
Thank you
for that. And 2 questions. When's your next book out?
It's open. We don't have a hard deadline. We're still working on it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. We will stay attuned.
My agent would also like to know the answer to that question.
We will stay tuned. Yeah. And I want to just ask you this as we close out. This has been so beautiful, and I thank you for just being so real and open and your chakras are wide open, Julian, as I would say, and I really appreciate that. So much of what you deal with, though, is, to use your language from earlier, distressing. Some might say depressing, and it's hard. The work and the subject matter is hard, and it can wear you down. And so, I want to ask you how you stay so buoyant. I mean, when Julian picked me up in Guam, we were laughing, I think, for like an hour and a half straight and just talking story, and it was beautiful. And you're full of joy, despite the weight that you carry in terms of the work that is so hard and so personal. And so how do you continue to be lifted in your own spirits?
Yeah, that's a great answer. My husband, Ron, is part of the answer.
Ron is awesome.
To that.
Ron is awesome.
Yeah, thank you. But to dwell on that for a second, there's just so many people behind the scenes, who, not just in my life, but in all of our lives, who do so much of the invisible work of caretaking, who help lift so many others up and make it possible to do our work, like he makes it possible for me to do my work, right? But also, I think the best answer is that I truly don't feel responsible for all of it. The true answer, I think my joy, the source of it, is realizing humbly that I can only be responsible for my portion of the relay. I can only do my part in this time, in this body I inhabit, with this mind. That is all I have. So I have to let go of all of it and just do and sort of be of hell of a custodian of my own small corner of earth. I have to sweep it and mop it and caretake for it. I have to show up. I have to be masterful in my corner. But that also means another thing. It means that the work of the future is the work of solidarity, making common cause with others. Like, I have to trust that you will be a custodian of your corner. I have to trust that we are in this together. If I cannot trust that, or if it chafes too much, if I lose that, I think I would actually lose a bit of my joy. But part of it is because I know, that I'm in a community with other people. And I know that there's so many people in the room tonight, so many people in this place, I know we've worked on concrete campaigns together. And I know that they're doing what they can, and that I can do what I can and bring my unique set of skills, and they are bringing their unique set of skills and doing it together. Granted, I'm not unaware of the challenge. I'm also not unaware of the time frame we're on. But if I allow myself to go down a road where I no longer trust that I'm connected to these other people, then I can't even go on. I mean, so it's true. It's radical to us in some ways, because we're like, I'm leaning on these people, this whole row right here. I'm leaning on them to do their part and to make common cause with me. And the other thing is, of course, music. When I picked you up from my car, I was blasting Shaka Demas and the Pliers' Murder, She Wrote.
And we immediately started singing together.
That we have to find ways to lift each other and to stay up. Yeah. Because, so many of the forces of the world would have us dragged down.
Yes.
Yeah.
I also want to say, Julian is incredibly generous with his time, with his spirit, with his energy. And one of the things that I really want to just underscore is he spoke about our students and the students you work with and the interns and the people he works with. I mean, you are so incredibly caring and generous in bestowing and passing on in the moment your wisdom and your knowledge and your hopes and your how-to. And that's also a gift and a blessing onto others who get to share space with you, Julian. And that's not everybody does that, and I want to just underscore that because that's an act of generosity, and it's also an act that is so future-oriented and acknowledging of everybody's gift in the moment. And I just want to celebrate you and all that you do. And just this, I mean, isn't he wonderful? And so thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you for coming.
Thank you all so much. I hope you enjoyed the evening. I know we started a little late, but thank you so much.